Edwin Canistracci here. It's been a minute. I'm in a transitional phase in my life. I'm in between homes. Yes, no longer in the Tampa condo. That's gone. I sold it. I'm moving on, but I'm not quite where I'm going to be quite yet. Currently staying with family during this transitional period while I'm looking for a new home. Yeah, I'm looking for a new home. So in the meantime, I'm kind of a nomad, but I wanted to do a video. During this period. I wanted to document Edwin as the middle-aged nomad with no home. And I thought, well, since this is a transitional period, I should talk about an artist whose whole entire career was like one big transitional period because he was constantly evolving, constantly changing, more so than any other artist. Yeah, like even more so than the Beatles. Miles Davis never stopped changing and evolving. And Miles Davis is one of my favorite artists of all time. And Miles Davis is someone I've been promising to make a video about for a very long time. Enjoying a little old school scotch, J&B scotch. Yep. Feel like that's what Miles probably would have been drinking back in the day. That was the most popular scotch back in the 60s and into the 70s before Johnny Walker started to take over. But back in the day, real men drank J&B scotch. And I enjoy it. Got a nice, crisp, clean taste. A lot like Miles's trumpet playing. See what I did there? How I segued into that? Yep, nice, clean, crisp, soulful. There's going to be a lot of Miles Davis gushing in this video. I know what I like. I know what I respond to. I know what moves me. And Miles Davis moves me perhaps more than any other artist. Just look at my music library collection there. See all that Miles Davis? I got more Miles Davis albums than I have even Motorhead and Rolling Stones. And that's a lot. I have all of his Columbia studio albums and a lot of other stuff and live albums and compilations and box sets and things I probably don't even need because I have so much Miles Davis. I will be discussing 63 to 69. Essentially, I'm covering the Second Great Quintet, what they refer to as Miles Davis's Second Great Quintet, and I'm going to talk about that evolution and how that evolution from what they call post-bop to fusion happened. Post-bop, that's what the kids are calling it these days anyway. That's what it says on Wikipedia. Back when I was getting hip to jazz and fusion and Miles Davis, we called it free bop, but apparently free bop is not as frequently used as post bop. At least that's what the Google AI has informed me. I guess the AI knows better because it has done a more extensive Google search than I have. So I will respect the AI's highly extensive Google search and say, fine, it's post bop. I know most people would have pegged me as a fusion guy as being my favorite period of Miles Davis, and I do love it, and I'm going to discuss the fusion period in a subsequent video. But the fusion period is actually my second favorite Miles Davis phase. This period, this era is actually my favorite Miles Davis era, and my favorite Miles Davis band is the Second Great Quintet. So that's why I want to hit this first. I want to hit the Second Great Quintet first. And I got notes. Got a lot of notes because I don't want the diehard jazz nerds getting mad at me because I got one piece of information wrong. We're beginning in 1963. I decided to start with 7 Steps to Heaven. Itself a transitional album, but it is the first one to feature a proto version of the Second Great Quintet. So I feel like this journey, this evolution that Miles starts going on, begins with this album. At this point, Miles was definitely the most popular guy in jazz. His only competition was John Coltrane at this point. But John Coltrane was kind of seen as like the hipper guy at this period. And like, where was Miles going to go? That's the question. He was in his 30s and he didn't want to be thought of as just like that guy that can play some pretty ballads on his muted trumpet. But he didn't entirely know where he was going yet. So with this album, 7 Steps to Heaven, he's got like 1 foot kind of in the past and 1 foot forward. He has 2 bands essentially playing here, although there are 2 musicians that link these 2 bands. The first lineup is a lineup that didn't quite take. On piano, a guy named Victor Feldman, and on drums, Frank Butler. But with this lineup were also Ron Carter, who would become the bassist for the Second Great Quintet, and George Coleman, who is part of what I refer to as the proto-Second Great Quintet. Now, he recorded some tracks with this lineup, but this lineup didn't really stick together, save for Coleman and Carter, who he retained, but he needed to find a new pianist and a new drummer. And when he hooked up with Herbie Hancock, yes, that Herbie Hancock, who at this stage was young, but he already had his first album released as a band leader in his own right and had a hit with the song Watermelon Man. So Herbie already was kind of bringing some cred. He was a hip young new guy on the jazz scene, an amazing pianist. My second favorite jazz pianist after Thelonious Monk. Although my favorite piano solo in jazz of all time is from Herbie Hancock and on a song and album that we're going to discuss. So he got Herbie in the bag. That was great. And a guy that Herbie had worked with before, a very young man named Tony Wilms. Tony Wilms is my favorite drummer of all time. Yes, I have said before that Phil Rudd of AC/DC is my favorite drummer. But what I meant to say was my favorite rock drummer. Love rock drumming, love rock and roll. But if I had to pick who the greatest drummer of all time is, it's this scrappy young man, Tony Wilms. Yeah, greatest drummer of all time, in my opinion. He was only 17 years old when he did this album. Yeah, he's a teenager. He was just 17 years old, and he was already playing with adult jazz musicians who were like the top most professional jazz musicians in the world. So good on you, young Tony Williams. With this new lineup, with this new young blood thrown into the equation, he recorded the three best songs on this album. Yeah, the title track, So Near, So Far, and Joshua. Amazing songs, and they're the three strongest tracks on the album. The other tracks are great, but these three tracks are the real standouts, and you kind of hear the beginning of something here. It's not total post-bop yet, but it's definitely moving in the post-bop direction. You could definitely hear the energy and fresh ideas that this band is bringing to the table. There's something happening with these tracks, on these three tracks with this lineup, that isn't really happening with the other tracks. An evolution, the next step after Kinda Blue. They feel like they're moving forward, and this album was very well received. At the time, it was actually the Miles Davis album that charted the highest, and it sold really well, and Miles was holding on to the crown. So he knew he had something going. He knew he had something going with this proto Second Great Quintet. So they started playing live. In fact, the first album that entirely features this proto Second Great Quintet is actually a live album, Miles Davis in Europe, which was released in 1964. It's a really good album. Everything is amazing from this period on, so of course I enjoy it. It's great. However, recorded a few months later was the live album that was more than a live album. It was an album statement, more on that in a minute, but the album that really pushed Miles' music to the next level, and that is My Funny Valentine, recorded in 64 but released in 1965. This is again the proto Second Great Quintet, which has Ron Carter, Herbie Hancock, Tony Williams, and George Coleman on sax. Yes, he's going to be the odd man out, as you will discover. This proto Second Great Quintet recorded this. They recorded it in the Philharmonic in Lincoln Center in New York City. It was part of a series of benefit concerts in support of civil rights initiatives at the time, and also a tribute to JFK, who was assassinated the prior year. So this was both politically, culturally, and musically a significant concert at the time, and they captured it on record, and this was the best recorded and best sounding live album at that time. A lot of the live recordings in the 50s don't sound that strong. It's not until the 60s where you can hear that there was a jump in recording quality, and you definitely hear it on this album. But the main thing is musically. Musically, this album shows this band evolving, and even though they're primarily playing jazz standards and one classic track from Kinda Blue, they're stepping away from the old forms. They're playing the ballads in a, I would say, slightly darker and more abstract fashion. It's still emotional, don't get me wrong. It's still soulful and beautiful and wistful, but there is a cerebral quality that's coming in where there's a little more going on. It's not sentimental. With this new band, Miles is shaving off the sentimentality and kind of getting to the darker essence underneath this wistfulness and melancholia. It's creating actually a deeper, richer beauty because it's evoking mortality and modern day angst and all this stuff that's going on at that moment in time. Things that are still going on to this day. Like you hear, like in My Funny Valentine, you hear the civil rights struggle in the music along with the beauty of its melody. But Miles is stretching out the melody. He's stretching it out with this new band like you had a nice little pretty ditty that you can kind of slow dance with your date with at some dance on a boardwalk somewhere, And this is taking it and making it the sprawling, richer, and darker epic where you have that slow dance and then you have sex, but then something weird happens between you guys, and then you break up, and then you get back together a little bit later on, and then you break up again, and then maybe one of you dies. And this is what it becomes. It becomes something far more complicated and nuanced and interesting. And this is a band playing My Funny Valentine, this old classic jazz pop standard, something that he played with the First Great Quintet. But this is why I think even this proto Second Great Quintet is better than the First Great Quintet. Nothing against them. They were amazing. But that being said, when they played it, it was a perfectly executed version of a jazz standard ballad. When this band plays it, it's something else. Plus, it's much longer. It's been expanded. It's an epic. It's an epic track. This track alone is a revolution. It's a musical revolution. And then what they do with the other tracks as well, like Stella by Starlight, breathtakingly beautiful. Leather version of All Blues, I Thought About You, all amazing. At this point, Miles is still the focal point, which was usually the standard for a band leader in jazz. The side players were there. They would do their solos. They kind of keep it all together. But there was never a question about who the star was. Like when Louis Armstrong played or Dizzy Gillespie played, there was never a question about who the star musician is. That's one way that this album still has a foot in the past, is that it's still clear that this is Miles' show. I would say this is the pinnacle of Miles as a balladeer, as a trumpet player, a muted trumpet player of ballads. This is him taking it to a peak. And yeah, it's a live album, but it makes a studio album statement. And it's kind of presented that way too, because it was part of a fuller concert, but they focus on just the ballads, just the moody ballads. As a result, it creates an atmosphere, and they save the up-tempo numbers for another live album that they took from the same show called Four and More, which they released a couple years later. That in itself was a statement, and that's a great album. But this one is definitely the bigger and more substantial statement. I think Miles Davis's trumpet playing on My Funny Valentine in this recording could be probably his single greatest trumpet playing. I'm not saying it's his best album. I think that there are even better albums to come, and definitely better things to come from this group of musicians. But in terms of Miles, his trumpet playing and his solos, this is the pinnacle. It's not his pinnacle as a band leader. It's not his pinnacle as a record maker, but it's his pinnacle as a guy playing the trumpet and making you feel things. It used his trumpet to express all the pain and sorrow and happiness and joy and wistfulness, all these feelings that we have as human beings. And I think especially like masculine feelings. Not to say that women can't enjoy this too and get behind it, but there is something, whether it's like Hemingway or Norman Mailer or John Cassavetes or Frank Sinatra, Miles Davis is a uniquely masculine artist that's expressing a certain masculine pathos with his playing. This is like what a man feels like when he's in love and when he fucks things up and then he pines afterwards. And all this is going on. It's amazing. It's a masterpiece. It's one of the greatest works of art of all time. But Miles was just warming up. There was like one more live album that they released, but this time there's a new addition. George Coleman didn't hang in there, and he was replaced with Wayne Shorter. Wayne Shorter is the new tenor sax. So this is the beginning. This is now officially the beginning. No more proto bullshit. This is now officially the Second Great Quintet. The Second Great Quintet. Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Wayne Shorter, and Tony Williams. And what's great is, along with Ron Carter and Herbie Hancock, and sometimes even Tony Williams, Wayne Shorter was an accomplished songwriter as well as saxophone player. So Miles Davis he's not just putting a band together of really talented musicians. He's putting together a band of really talented songwriters. And this is the thing that will ultimately make the Second Great Quintet the greatest quintet of all time in jazz, in my opinion. Even though I do love the First Great Quintet, to me, they are not on the same level as the Second Great Quintet. Not as musicians, but also more importantly as a whole. And I will talk more about this as we move on. They're not quite there yet, even with Wayne Shorter. They do a live album, which is more or less kind of like Miles Davis in Europe. It's called Miles in Berlin. Was recorded in 64, came out in 65. It's kind of a variation of what we've already been hearing. It's great. Like all this stuff is great, but it is kind of an album that's just kind of put out there just to have a product, and it's not the statement that My Funny Valentine is, in my opinion. But The album statement. The album statement with Wayne Shorter and the true debut of the Second Great Quintet is in 1965 with the studio album ESP. That's his wife Frances, Miles's first wife Frances on the cover. She was a dancer. That photograph was actually shortly before their separation and then divorce. Unfortunately, they had a very volatile relationship, and Miles wasn't, and he admitted this later in his autobiography. He had a lot of regret, especially for his first marriage with Frances, because he saw her as a good woman, and he owned up that he was a real bastard with her. He always cheated on her. He was drinking, doing drugs, a lot of cocaine, and it wouldn't stop here. It would only get worse later on. He was an abusive cat. Miles was not always the best husband or, from the sound of it, the best father, but he was a genius. So what are you going to do? As F. Scott Fitzgerald once said, they expected me to spell too? Miles Davis, what, you expect him to be the greatest genius of the 20th century and a nice guy? Hey, that's asking too much, I think. I mean, hey, it's great if you're a genius and a nice guy, but it doesn't always work out that way. So I'll take my geniuses however I can. So ESP, amazing album. I love that album cover too. You can see Frances standing there looking great, and Miles is looking at her like, hey, what's that woman thinking about? Is she thinking about leaving my ass? Which she was. I don't know if I'd say it's better than My Funny Valentine, but it is the best studio album at this point. Yes, that's right. This might be controversial, but I think this is better than Kinda Blue. I love Kinda Blue, but I'll tell you right now, there's about 10 Miles studio albums that I love more than Kinda Blue. So ESP is one of the best jazz albums ever. And every other album that the Second Great Quintet did is even better. So wow. How great do these albums get? Well, this album, right out of the gate with the song ESP, this is already a very innovative, new kind of jazz song. If My Funny Valentine was kind of one foot in the past, one foot in the future, this is full-fledged into the future of jazz. This is full-fledged post-bop, if you want to call it post-bop. I guess some of you might be, whoa, what's post-bop? What's that mean? Okay, it's a little vague, and even the highly Google-savvy AI is not entirely sure about what it means. But essentially, it's kind of a compromise between bebop and free jazz. All right, so it's a little freer and looser and experimental than bebop, which followed more strict structure. It's kind of what people think of as standard jazz as bebop, and free jazz is like totally just out there. It's atonal, like Ornette Coleman shit. Post bop, or sometimes free bop, is essentially like something in the middle where you have these little moments. You can maybe throw in a little atonal hit here, or go a little against the rhythm, or play around the melody there, but you eventually kind of come back to a melodic center, because that was important to Miles, because Miles, he was not a big fan of free jazz, but at the same time he wanted to stretch, he wanted to stay relevant, and he wanted to keep challenging himself. So it's kind of like, how far can we get? How far can we get while still retaining some sense of musicality and melodic richness? And that's kind of where post-bop is, which is what's great about it, and what I love about it. It's like the sweet spot. It's like just crazy enough to keep you interesting, but there's enough melody and musicality still there that makes you think like it's not just a bunch of fucking noise. It's also more aggressive, a little more aggressive. Like there was fast bebop back in the day, and Charlie Parker played really fast, but it's a little punchier, it's a little more direct. I would say in a lot of ways, and this might sound like a stretch to some people, bebop is like rock and roll and hard rock, or more rootsy oriented rock and roll, and post bop is more like punk rock, heavy metal, thrash, post-punk. It's not as rootsy, it's more modern in its approach, it's less sentimental, it's getting away from where we were and pushing us to where we're going. And that's all happening with ESP, and all the band are contributing. You know, Miles is writing, Ron Carter's writing, Wayne Shorter's writing, Herbie Hancock's writing, and right out of the gate with this album, like they're a band. Like that's a thing that's a little different. In the past, all jazz artists, like I said, it was like there was a clear band leader and the sidemen were there to support him. Even when John Coltrane played with Miles Davis in the first Great Quintet, there's still no question about who the star of the band was. It was Miles Davis. You know, John Coltrane didn't really explode until he became a band leader in his own right. But here, Miles is letting everyone shine. Everyone's shining. They're all very equal. This is the thing. A lot of people have complained that Miles, in addition to being a shitty husband and father, was an egotist. And yes, he was an egotist, but not when it came to the music. That's the thing. Miles could go off. He was very braggadocious about himself, as he should be, because he's the fucking greatest genius of the 20th century. That being said, when it came time to playing music, especially at this period, Miles was putting his ego in check and allowing these other musicians to come out. And this is one of the main reasons why Miles Davis became the ultimate education for future band leaders. So many people, so many artists that we'll be talking about became band leaders in their own right, because Miles gave them that freedom. He gave them that freedom to express themselves as artists and create their own identities. And this is all happening right here on ESP. Every one of these players, Shorter, Hancock, Willems, Carter, they're all getting to express themselves. I would liken it to Jimmy Page's approach in Led Zeppelin. Jimmy Page, as accomplished as he was, as talented as he was, definitely the leader of the band, but at the same time, he allowed the other three members of Zeppelin to all step up and contribute equally. In terms of his playing, too, as a guitar player, he did what was good for the song. Miles Davis, same thing. Same thing here. It's not all just about trumpet playing. Already on this album, he would take this even further on subsequent albums. But here it's just he does what he does. He lets the other guys do what they do. This is another reason why I think the Second Great Quintet really should just be called the Great Quintet, because they are the greatest quintet ever in jazz. I think they're the greatest band in jazz. I think this is the greatest combination of souls ever in jazz, because they are a band. Maybe ultimately, because I'm more of a rock guy than a jazz guy for the most part, maybe that's something I respond to. I respond to the fact that this is a band, like a proper band. And this is why, too, they lasted longer. Lasted longer than the first Great Quintet or any other lineup Miles had. This is the longest, most consistent lineup of guys. There was really something here. There was something here. Miles said it was telepathic. That's why it's ESP. Instantly, we had this ESP. We had this telekinetic quality where we were connecting with each other and we were finishing each other's musical phrases and ideas. And there was really something special going on with these guys. 81, amazing song. I think ESP and 81 should have become live staples, and they didn't do that. In fact, Agitation, great song that Miles wrote, is the only song that would become a live staple. Didn't play a lot of this live for whatever reason. I don't know why, because I think ESP and 81 especially would go over really well. 81, really funky, cool song. You would actually think it was a Herbie Hancock composition from the sound of it, but it's actually Ron Carter and Miles Davis. Very funky, very bluesy. Sounds like a natural extension of Kind of Blue, modal bluesy jazz. And then we get into Little One, which Herbie Hancock did write. Beautiful, melancholic ballad. Love it. Agitation, which is really aggressive. This would be the equivalent of Chemical Warfare for jazz. This is thrash for jazz. It's heavy. It's dark. It's dissonant at times. It's something different and new. It's no wonder why it would become a live staple for a few years. It's a great track. Love it. Iris is a beautiful song. And then it ends with Mood. Mood is a beautiful, melancholic, as you would suspect from the title, moody song. It's over 8 minutes long, and it just stretches it, and it just creates an atmosphere to it. I love it. In a lot of ways, Mood is the perfect bridge between Kind of Blue and In a Silent Way, right there in one song. It's that after hours, perfect jazz song. Every after hours jazz song was kind of suggesting a song like Mood, and then Mood goes right in there and is an even more authentic and more powerful version of that kind of jazz song that was created before, but never quite like this. And then we have the legendary Plugged Nickel. Yeah, Plugged Nickel performances. Now, I got to talk about these because these are live performances at a nightclub in Chicago called the Plugged Nickel, where Miles with this lineup, the Second Great Quintet, they played for a couple nights, and they essentially became yet another band. This is the musical bridge between ESP and Miles Smiles. And you can hear all these shows on the complete live at the Plug Nickel box set. Amazing box set, which my friend Sam the Man, yeah, you're out there, Sam the Man. Thank you so much. You hooked me up with a lot of these great box sets, which at the time it came out, I didn't have like the money or whatever. And now it's like just way too much to afford. And Sam hooked me up. And he hooked me up with a lot of box sets over the years and a lot of cool Miles stuff that I didn't have before to complete my collection. So I appreciate you, Sam. Thank you so much. You're awesome. You know you're awesome. These recordings were only like bootlegged and never officially released in America for decades, actually. There was an album, a double album, live at the Plug Nickel in Japan in the late 70s. And then in the 90s, there was an album of other performances. But essentially, this was just something that was talked about amongst diehard jazz fans and jazz musicians. And these are legendary performances. Thankfully, Columbia did ultimately release the complete live at the Plug Nickel. And I think that that's the way to listen to it. I've listened to the condensed versions, and there was also a highlights album that came out at the same time as the box set. But I think this is something that, unlike My Funny Valentine, where I think they arranged those two albums, that album and Four and More work better as separate albums, and they work as studio album statements, even though they're live. I feel like the Plug Nickel, really, you just got to hear all of it. To me, you're just scraping the surface whenever you hear it as just a single or double album. Obviously, the music's great. It's not like those albums aren't great. But to me, it's like the Bob Dylan's The Basement Tapes. It doesn't all quite add up to its full splendor unless you hear it all. That's the thing about the Plug Nickel recordings. You just gotta hear it all. You gotta hear every night because it wasn't recorded to be an album. That's why they didn't put it out as an album initially. It was them working it out. They were trying to work out where they were going as a band. And for the most part, they just played standards. Kind of like what they did on My Funny Valentine. It's them taking this post-bop approach to the standard jazz material and taking it to new places. You hear the band. You slowly, every night. That's why you gotta kind of listen to it as the whole sprawling box set. Every night they're working their way to what they're going to become. And they're about to write, record, and release the greatest jazz album of all time, in my opinion. Here we go. Here's the big one. My favorite Miles Davis album of all time. My favorite jazz album of all time. And just one of my favorite albums of all time, period. Miles Smiles, recorded in 66 but released in 1967. Yeah, same year as Sgt. Pepper. But whereas that was a really obvious cultural shift, this was a low-key culture shift. It's not like In a Silent Way or Bitches Brew, where it was obviously a new thing, especially to people that didn't listen to jazz. But if you were really hip in 67 and a jazz fan, I don't know, I suspected a few people knew what was going on because this is the greatest jazz album of all time. Hey, listen, I love Kinda Blue. I don't want to be that guy that's just knocking down Kinda Blue because it's the most popular jazz album of all time. But my world, the world I live in, the world inside my head that I think everyone else should live in, Miles Smiles is the biggest selling jazz album of all time, because it should be, because it's the greatest jazz album of all time. I love this album so much. It's insane. So everything that they learned about themselves as musicians and human beings and souls on this planet that they learned while playing at the Plug Nickel, they took that into the fucking studio and recorded Miles Smiles. Miles did not like to smile, by the way. There's a deeper significance to this title and photo that's on the album cover. I love the orange too. I love the bright orange. Miles did not like to smile, and even though he was a fan of Louis Armstrong and respected him as a trumpet player, he hated how Louis smiled all the time because he thought that was some straight up Uncle Tom shit. But Miles was so enthralled and happy and content with these recordings and this music that he was making with this band that he couldn't help to fucking break out into a big grin. Yeah, that's his album. You listen to it and you smile because you have to smile. You can't help to smile. To finally make that rhyme for an album title, but it's authentic and true. This has to be the greatest Miles album. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of people, especially a lot of hardcore jazz fans and Miles fans, do love this album, and it is considered one of his greatest albums. Still, I do wish that it was talked about as much as albums like Kinda Blue and Bitches Brew. It's the best produced jazz album, too. And Tio Maceo Maceo, who produced all of Miles's greatest albums. He's a big part in terms of the composition even of the songs and how they're arranged and put together in a studio context on the Fusion albums. He helped create In a Silent Way and Bitches Brew and Live Evil like a musical participant himself. So I can't really say this is his best production in that sense. If we're talking about a producer, it's just a guy who just records the band playing to the utmost greatest ability that he can do, well, then this is his pinnacle as a producer. It's amazing. The sound is great. It's crisp. Even though I understand that some of this post-bop stuff is a little too abstract and maybe a little cerebral for some people, but it does have two really melodic, beautiful songs that I feel like if people can get past the first song, they would get into. But the first song, Orbits, is awesome. If some people have problems with that, some people are going to have problems with Awesome Things sometimes. That's not the awesome thing's problem. That's the person's problem for having a problem with an awesome thing. Orbits is great. It's a Wayne Shorter composition, but come on, this doesn't even feel like a composition. That just feels like the little seed that they plant and they're springing off into all these different directions. Orbits, it's intense. It raises questions. You hear this music and it makes you wonder about things and think about things. Tony Williams, and he had many fine moments before and he had many fine moments afterwards. Still think this is Tony Williams' greatest drumming ever. It's a little like how Sonic Youth controls chaos. Tony Williams controls the chaos of his drumming. He's doing a lot of shit, but he knows just how to hit everything at just the right moment. He's keeping the beat and he's being that propulsive rhythm while still exploring and doing a lot of shit. He plays both the rhythm and lead drum at the same time. It's amazing. And the way it's moving along, the whole band, this band is tight. Like you just hear Orbits, like they've already evolved so much. And they were great. They were great out of the gate with ESP. But you already hear that coming off of the Plug Nickel, how they're just this beast. They're this beast of a band already just with Orbits. Then we go to Circle, Miles Davis composition. My favorite Miles Davis song, my favorite jazz song, one of my favorite pieces of music of all time, be it like a top 5 song, one of the greatest recordings of all time, features my favorite piano work. This is a song I alluded to earlier. My favorite piano work and my favorite piano solo from Herbie Hancock. One of the most beautiful pieces of music of all time. If you listen to Circle and you don't get anything out of it, I lament and drink to the soul you do not have. It is the first time where you see a little foreshadowing of some of the production prowess of Tio Maceo, because he actually tagged on an ending where Herbie Hancock does this cool little like coda on the piano, which was actually from another take. It was not the master take, but they spliced it together because they liked that ending. And they even had a little great snippet of Miles, which I love. I love the studio chatter. I love that you hear Miles talking to Tio on this album. Another thing that creates a vibe. Let's hear how that sounds, Tio. And it's amazing. It's one of the greatest pieces of music of all time. And then it goes into Footprints, Wayne Shorter. I would say it's the greatest Wayne Shorter composition. It's a sprawling, epic jazz masterpiece. I say it does for this album what All Blues did for Kind of Blue. It's the heart of the album. It's the epic of the album. It's the soul of the album. It's the most melodic track on the album. It's a masterpiece. On their own, John Coltrane, I think, is superior to Wayne Shorter. But playing with Miles, Wayne Shorter's the best. They really linked up. They sync up these melodies that they play, like on Footprints. Like Miles and Shorter are in that box. And what Herbie's doing around them, and Tony doing his thing, and Ron Carter holding it together. He's the real heart. He's the rhythm section within the rhythm section. It's a masterpiece for the ages. Second half, it's like, okay, we did the 2 most melodic songs that some other people might like. But now we're just doing the songs that people like you like. Dolores, amazing song. Kind of like Orbits. It's more atonal. It goes in a lot of different directions. Freedom Jazz Dance, which hits these really hard riffs and hooks. It's aggressive. It's hard. It's hard, aggressive man jazz. So there you go. And then Gingerbread Boy, love those hooks. Da, 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 da. You hear a lot of these hooks kind of emerging in the Plug Nickel performances, even while they're playing standard songs. Some of these hooks, like this hook, you hear them coming through, playing with melody, harmonies. There's a dexterity, there's a nimbleness. You can hear like this is a band fully in the zone. A band fully in the zone. It's the greatest jazz album of all time, the greatest Miles album. I love it. Next, we're moving to the same year, same goddamn year. That's how people used to make records. In 1967, they do Sorcerer, the third album from the Great Quintet. I'm gonna have a little bit less to say with this one. It's not quite Miles Smiles, but it's still an amazing album. All these albums from the Second Great Quintet are masterpieces. If you're curious, that's Cicely Tyson on the cover. He's already divorced from Frances at this point. Cicely Tyson is an actress. It was his girlfriend at the time. Years later, he would marry her in the 80s, and she would be his third and final wife, although they got a divorce before he died too. So unfortunately, Miles never had a wife that he didn't divorce or didn't divorce him because he was a real son of the bitch. Great album cover. Love that profile of Cicely Tyson. She's the muse. She's the sorcerer. This is another amazing album. Prince of Darkness. That sets the tone. Prince of Darkness. This is dark, probing jazz that balances melody and atonality perfectly. Then we go into a beautiful little ballad, actually written by Tony Williams, Pee Wee, which Miles does not play on. God, what a team player is Miles at this point. He has tracks on his album where he doesn't even play. That might annoy some jazz purists, but I like it. He's about the band. This is a band. This is the Miles Davis Quintet. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to murder this title, although it's one of the standout tracks and would become a live staple for many years. Masqueleo. 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 Actually, the more I say Masqueleo, the sexier it sounds. Masqueleo. Standout track on the album. Amazing song. It has an amazing horn line between Miles and Shorter. Dun, 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 dun. That's like heavy fucking metal, but with jazz. Bum, 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 bum. It's amazing. But then it goes into this exotic, melancholic, moody, probing piece. Sounds like an extension of Sketches of Spain. So you got the Sketches of Spain feel, but with the fucking quintet playing it. It's amazing. This is one of the songs that they kept playing even as a fusion band years later, and it's awesome. The Sorcerer, which is kind of a title track. Herbie Hancock wrote this tune. Another great post-bop gem. Limbo's great. It's all great. The whole album's great. However, an album that I think is even better, and I think is the second greatest album of the Second Great Quintet, is the next album that we're discussing, and that is Nefertiti. Nefertiti, which came out in 1968. One of the greatest jazz albums of all time. It feels like it's hitting yet another level. I would say this is my fourth favorite Miles Davis album. I don't think you could top Miles Smiles, but this is definitely my second favorite of the Second Great Quintet, and my fourth favorite Miles Davis album overall. Now, I'm not a guy that likes to use the adjective Sphinx-like too often, because I think that's a little pretentious, but this album is Sphinx-like. It starts off with the title track, Nefertiti, written by Shorter. Man, how could this not be the greatest jazz band of all time with these guys writing these songs? These guys are writing songs like motherfuckers. Miles Davis would describe it that way too. Whether he loved someone or hated someone, there was a good chance he was going to call them a motherfucker. So Wayne Shorter, this motherfucker, wrote Nefertiti. It's not fusion, but some of the things that Tio Maceo and Miles would do with the production of the next album and the subsequent fusion albums with their playing of drone funk and repetition and trance-like elements that would foreshadow ambient music and hip-hop and a lot of other forms of music to come. This kind of starts with Nefertiti, even though there's no like studio trickery here. It's just the band playing. But what they're doing is they're playing this melody, this repeating, dark, foreboding melody with Miles and Shorter playing the horn lines in that melody, and everyone's kind of playing around it. The basic core, the song doesn't really change so much in terms of the melody. It's terms of their interpretation of the melody, and it becomes increasingly abstract and fragmented, and they take it to different places while always retaining the feeling and the emotion and pathos of that melody. It puts you into a trance. Even though this is not an electric album, it is the last fully acoustic Miles Davis album. it's definitely from a compositional standpoint and from a musical approach and how they play, it's definitely the first step towards fusion, in my opinion, because it's playing on this idea, an idea that Miles might have picked up from like James Brown at this point, this idea of repetition. So they're playing off the repetition, but it never feels stagnant. It never feels repetitious, even though they're playing with repetition. I would describe it as watching a sunset, slowly watching a sunset, and each shade shades into another shade, and it gets darker and darker and richer until you're finally in night. And that's Nefertiti, one of the most beautiful compositions and recordings of all time. And then they get to another beautiful recording, Fall, which likewise plays with this haunting, repetitious, melancholic melody that they play around, and Hancock does all this amazing piano work around it. It's beautiful. It's just one of the most beautiful, melancholic pieces of music ever. You hear this, and to me, it's like, this is what life is. You might not want to always admit it, but life can be very sad and beautiful at the same time. And that's what Fall on the Miles Davis Quintet album, Nefertiti, sounds like. It sounds like life. This is life. It's the fall. It's everything. It's beautiful. And then, Hand Jive's great. Madness is great. Riot. It gets a little more like onto that more aggressive side on the second half of this album. And it's amazing. And this is one of the greatest albums of all time. Some people consider Feliz de Kilimanjaro the true transition album from post-bop to fusion. But I consider Feliz de Kilimanjaro fusion. I feel like that's the beginning of fusion, and not in a silent way. And I will make that case when we do the second video. I'm going to begin with that album. I'm going to begin with 1969. Okay, so now we're talking about Miles in the Sky, 1968. Kind of like Seven Steps to Heaven had one foot in the past, one foot in the future. This album has one foot in the past of the Second Great Quintet and one foot in the future of fusion. So this is the true transition album, especially with the first track, Stuff, a electric piano, an electric instrument, a Fender Rhodes, being played by Herbie Hancock. This is still the Second Great Quintet, but Herbie Hancock is playing an electric Fender Rhodes, and this is an instrument he would continue to play throughout the 70s, and obviously Herbie Hancock would become very noted for playing with electronic instruments, from electric pianos to synthesizers into the 80s. And this was something that Miles was pushing. Miles was pushing these young guys to keep moving this direction. He was getting into modern music. He loved modern R&B and rock. He loved James Brown and Jimi Hendrix and Sly Stone. So he was pushing this band to go more in that direction. The Fender Rhodes was kind of the first step. It's a natural first step for a jazz band to make that wants to take a step into embracing rock and R&B music. So that's the first thing that hits you. First thing that hits you with Stuff is the subtly funky electric piano from Herbie Hancock, and it's great. Paraphernalia is the second track, and it actually has George Benson on guitar. Legendary jazz guitarist George Benson comes in as a guest star to play the electric guitar on this track, although for the most part he's kind of playing in a traditionally jazzy way, but is an electric guitar. So he's argumenting the Second Great Quintet. It's, I guess, technically a sextet here with a guitar, and that's something else that will be expanded upon on subsequent records when Miles starts including electric guitar on his album. So again, a foreshadowing. The last two tracks, though, on the second side are just purely Second Great Quintet. In fact, it's the last, at least released at the time, as their existence as a band, the Second Great Quintet's last two purely acoustic jazz recordings of Black Comedy and Country Sun. Two amazing songs. Black Comedy, I think, could have been on Nefertiti. Beautiful, haunting song. And then my favorite track on the album, Country Sun. Country Sun is an epic. It kind of sums it all up. It's a long track. It's like, how long is this? It's over 13 minutes. It's epic. It goes so many places. In a lot of ways, it does everything that the Second Great Quintet did, but in one song. It's almost kind of like what the Abbey Road medley did for the Beatles. This does for the Second Great Quintet. It goes to a lot of places, some dark, some atonal, but then I love when it moves and shifts into this brighter, kind of soulful, almost gospel-like part. And Herbie Hancock's piano is amazing during that section especially. Different moods and shades, and everything everything that the band did so well, everything that the band did so perfectly and ingeniously and beautifully, they do on this song. And you also just hear the changing times. It's like this is the changing times with the sexual revolution and counterculture and civil rights. It's like this is the other side. Like if there was sadness in Miles' trumpet playing when he was playing in the first half of the 60s during My Funny Valentine over the state of civil rights, now in 1968 he's actually playing with hope and optimism, and the band sounds optimistic. Like they're getting their fucking swerve on, they're getting their swagger on. They're like, we're moving ahead, we're moving on, we're going on up now. You hear that journey, that whole journey in country, son. It uplifts you, it uplifts me. Like I hear and I go, yeah, we're gonna fucking move forward. It's one of the greatest pieces of music that Miles Davis and this quintet recorded, and that's saying a lot. And now I'm going to end on one album that technically, at least according to Wikipedia, they call it a compilation. I take some issues with that. Water Babies, I want to end with, because if this was released in like early 69, it would have been the ultimate transition album. But of course it wasn't. It was released in 1976, right after Miles Davis's retirement. So it was the first album released after his retirement where they were going back to the vaults. Tio Maceo did produce it, and he did his thing, and he put it together like an album. And that's one of the reasons why I take issue with calling it a compilation, because at the time, none of these tracks were released. And it is an album statement. It's an album. It's an album. It's not a compilation. It's not a bunch of tracks that have nothing to do with each other. And there's a logic to it. Even how the first half is the Second Great Quintet. It's just the acoustic Second Great Quintet stuff. And the second side is the fusion stuff, the beginning of fusion, when the Second Great Quintet transitioned into the fusion period. And the fact that Tony Williams is the drummer on all these tracks really holds it together. This wasn't released in 69, so you can't really consider it the true transition album. But if they had released in 69 and this came out like either before or after Feliz de Kilimanjaro and before In a Silent Way, I feel like this would definitely be considered a very important album. First three tracks are all Nefertiti outtakes, and as amazing as that album is, like how did Water Babies not make the cut? I don't know. I mean, to me, the only thing that could have made Nefertiti better, and as it is, like I said, it's my second favorite album from the Second Great Quintet and my fourth favorite Miles album overall. The only thing that might have pushed it up to third or second place might have been if Water Babies was on it. Such an amazing track, melodic, up there with like Footprints. It's amazing that this didn't make the cut. It helped Columbia out in 1976 that they had such a strong track to build an album around, and I love it. Capricorn, great track, dark, broody, moody, Sweet Pea, beautiful, haunting song. Some of Miles' greatest solos, love it. This is choice Second Great Quintet stuff right here on the first side. And then the second side, Two-Faced and Dual Mr. Tillman Williams, which is a reference to Tony Williams, who wrote this track, which is a great slamming, fun, funky track that definitely foreshadows the direction they're going to go into. And these two tracks both feature electric piano, both Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea, new guy, and it also features Dave Holland on these two tracks, who would be the bassist on In a Silent Way and would be the bassist on subsequent Miles Davis fusion albums. So this is not technically the Second Great Quintet. The track here that's the real standout after the title track is Two-Faced, Tony Williams. To me, this is his greatest drumming. You hear him like doing almost like drum and bass, like jungle type drumming in the midsection. So modern for early 69. It's amazing. This music would be modern now. It sounds futuristic, and the double electric piano from Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock, it's taking us somewhere else. Even though it was released in 1976, Water Babies is a retroactive, perfect transition album from the Second Great Quintet into the fusion period. And that's where I want to leave us right now. We're on the edge of something new. Yet again, something new after we were already on the edge of something new. And now technology is going to be involved. Electricity is going to be involved. Studio innovation is going to be involved. Drugs are going to be involved. A lot of things are going to be involved when I discuss Miles Davis and the fusion years, 69 to 75. 69 to 75 will be the next video, which I will do when I get a chance to do it. But anyway, so that was me talking about this period, the Second Great Quintet, in my opinion, the greatest Miles Davis quintet. We live in such a great reality, such a great existence where music like this existed, and it still exists to this day. So embrace it, embrace the culture. I am Edwin Canestracci, and I am out of here. Cheers.